it brought discredit and condemnation on them. So the mayor told me, in the presence of all of his civil rights citizens, that Israel was neither negotiating nor using military means. And I said, well, I'm going to Syria, and I will meet with Hamas and see what I can do about the rockets, which I'm not a negotiator. I was just there on observe. So I did.
Was this when you saw Assad as well as Mashal?
Yeah, this was in April.
Right.
Last year. So when I got there, Hamas declared, we will never have a ceasefire, just Gaza. We want a ceasefire in Gaza and the West Bank. And I knew the Israelis would refuse to have a ceasefire in West Bank, and still do. So I eventually got them to agree to consider a ceasefire just in Gaza. So since I'm not in the negotiating business, I relayed this information to the negotiator from Egypt, Omar Suleiman, who's head of Egypt's security force.
Right.
And he proceeded with the negotiation. And to make a long story short, about a month and a half later, I was informed by Hamas and Suleiman that an agreement had been reached between Israel and the Palestinians. Very simple agreement. No more rockets, no more attack on Gaza, and the Israelis would open up their border and let food and water and so forth come in. 30% in the first 13 days, and then 100% after that. So, and on the 19th of June, that went into effect.
Let me just understand what you were saying, because it's an important point here with George Mitchell going overseas, that you believe, and Hamas told you, that if in fact there had not been sanctions against them in terms of food and other requirements.
Yes, right.
To come across the border into Gaza, they would not have started the shelling, or they would have stopped the shelling.
That's correct.
It was an attempt to get attention because the Israelis were not allowing things.
That's correct. And
suppose
the ones that told me that were the Hamas leaders from Gaza. They are not the ultimate boss. Right. The ultimate bosses are in Damascus.
Well, that's and you met with them too. What did he tell you? What does he want? What does he believe is the future for Palestine?
His preeminent request to me was to get Israel to let food and water come into Gaza. And he was willing to stop the rockets if they would do so.
Now, that just doesn't... can I just ask a question, because I don't really understand it? If the Israelis don't want the rockets, that seems so, to me, such an obvious thing to do. Don't stop the food and water from going in there because there'll be no rockets.
Well, you'll have to talk to the Israelis about that.
Okay, but let me talk about the United States.
All right.
Suppose the United States had said to Israel, President Bush, or President Carter, or President Clinton, or President Obama, we very much want you to insist that you allow food and water to go to Gaza for the people of Gaza. Would it have happened?
I think they would probably have done it, but that did not happen.
So we did not ask them to do that under the Bush administration?
So far as I know, we did not. No. And they never stopped. I mean, they never stopped.
So the attitude here was, in your judgment, according to the Hamas leaders, they're trying to punish us because they don't want to recognize...
Hamas.
Yes.
I think I'm just surmising here,
right,
that what Israel wants to do then and now is to punish the people in Gaza in order to discredit Hamas. And they would like to see Fatah leaders who are compatible with Israelis retake over Gaza. I think it's a misjudgment on their part. I think in attacking the people of Gaza, they may have strengthened Hamas.
Supporters of Israel are watching this program right now, and they're saying, you know what they're saying. They're basically saying, that Hamas doesn't want to recognize Israel. Hamas does not believe Israel has a right to exist. Hamas, will never resist using terrorism. They do not want to see a real two-state down the line in terms of the criticism that you receive for the previous book, which you talk about in this book.
Well,
because you talked about a subtitle using the word apartheid.
Let me make an equivocal statement here. Your questions forced me to defend Hamas, and I'm not here.
I don't mean to do that, as you know.
Well, let me tell you what happened.
Right.
On the 19th of June, the ceasefire went into effect. And Egypt and Hamas told me the terms of the ceasefire. Israel denies negotiating with Hamas, so they won't accept publicly the fact that they agreed to these terms. Hamas basically stopped the rockets on the night. It took them a few days to stop all the rockets. But they had been firing 250 rockets a month on the average. They cut that down to one rocket, 8 rockets, 1 rocket per month. And those were mortar fires too. They can't control it 100%, but they cut it down more than 99%. Instead of Israel increasing the food supplies to 30% and then to 100%, they didn't do it. It just increased it to about 20%. But despite that, Hamas restrained as much as they could the rocket fire. And then